There used to be boats that flew, not hovered, flew, hull lifting out of the water on underwater wings, and by the 1960s, they were everywhere your grandparents traveled. The Soviets built thousands to run their rivers. Hong Kong ran them to Macau. They hit 60 miles an hour on open water, faster than your car. You did not decide to stop riding them. Nobody sent a memo. But by now, the fastest passenger boats ever built have quietly vanished from almost every route. No breakthrough replaced them. No disaster banned them. They just thinned out, one line at a time. So who killed the boat that flew? And why is the same trick suddenly showing up again? So here's the boring answer first, the one nobody puts on a poster. They got too expensive to run. Lifting a whole hull out of the water takes real power, and when the 1973 oil crisis sent fuel prices through the roof, every foilborne ferry on Earth turned into a line item somebody wanted to cut. Call it the flying tax. The fuel you burn just to climb up onto those wings, you already get this. It's the same reason you don't drive everywhere with the pedal floored. No ban, no disaster, just arithmetic. But that's the easy answer, and the real story is weirder. First, the trick itself, because it's genuinely clever. A hydrofoil bolts a pair of small underwater wings to struts below the hull. Sit still, and they do nothing. Speed up and water rushing over them makes lift, the same way air does over a plane wing until the whole boat rises and the hull leaves the water. Engineers call that foilborne. Drag falls off a cliff, and suddenly a modest boat is doing 60 miles an hour. Baron Hans von Schertl proved it worked commercially back in 1953 when a little Supermar hydrofoil called the Freccia d'Oro started skimming across Lake Maggiore. The winged boat wasn't a prototype dream. It carried paying passengers before your parents were born. The engineers weren't naive about the fragile parts either. By the mid-1970s, Boeing built the Jetfoil, water-jet-driven with fully submerged foils and an automatic control system, a computer quietly nudging the wings hundreds of times a second to keep your ride smooth. It crossed Hong Kong to Macau as the turbojet, and it ran in Japan for operators like Sato Kisen out of Niigata. This was the winged boat at its peak. Genuinely good. People rode it for decades. Which raises a different, dumber question. If the foilborne ferry was this good, why did your city never get one? Look under the waterline. Those foils and struts are precision machinery submerged, dragging through open water at highway speed. Hit a floating log, a chunk of ice, a stray shipping pallet, and you're not scratching paint. You're bending the one part holding your boat in the sky. Marine growth fouls them. Salt eats them. Everyone costs a fortune to inspect and repair. A regular ferry that clips some debris just shrugs. Your flying ferry goes to the shop. So, on top of the fuel bill, the boat that flew came with a maintenance bill that never stopped climbing. Telling maybe that Boeing handed Jetfoil production off to Kawasaki in Japan by 1987, barely a decade after showing it off. No ban, no disaster, just arithmetic. And even on a good day, it asked you to give things up. Big waves, the ride turns rough and the speed bleeds off, so the fastest boat ever built has a bad weather problem. Capacity? A Soviet Raketa sat 64 passengers and, crucially, not one single car. Meanwhile, the plane ferry it competed with could swallow your whole family plus the minivan. So the flying tax was never only fuel. It was a boat that cost more, broke easier, hated storms, and couldn't take your car to the other side. No ban, no disaster, just arithmetic. Here's the part people get wrong. The story you'd assume is that something better came along and replaced it. A superior machine. Progress marching on. Cool, mystery solved. Except that's not what happened. The thing that beat it wasn't better at flying. It couldn't fly at all. Through the 1980s and 90s, Australian builder Incat started turning out wave-piercing catamarans, boring, unmagical boats that stayed firmly in the water. They were slower than a hydrofoil, but they hauled more people, took cars, shrugged off chop, and cost a fraction to run. The ferry your city runs today, if it runs one, is almost certainly one of those unmagical catamarans. The winged boat didn't lose to the future. It lost to a cheaper boat doing duller math. No ban, no disaster, just arithmetic. But that can't be the full answer either, because a cheaper rival explains why nobody bought new ones. It doesn't explain why thousands of existing ones vanished almost overnight. For that, you go to Russia. Remember those Soviet riverboats? The Raketa launched in 1957, then the Meteor and the Kometa, and designer Rostislav Alexeyev's Central Hydrofoil Design Bureau turned out well over 1,000 of them to run the Volga and every river like it. They ran because the state paid for them. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the subsidy died. And the biggest fleet of flying boats in history was left to rust on the riverbanks through the 90s. You never rode one for a reason that had nothing to do with the boat and everything to do with a budget in Moscow. Not outcompeted, just abandoned. So the boat that flew got taxed out of existence by fuel, by fragility, by a cheaper rival, by a dead empire. End of story. Except it isn't, because the exact same trick is quietly coming back, and the reason is almost funny. Foiling showed up first in sport when the America's Cup went to foiling catamarans in 2013 and sailboats started flying across the bay. Then the batteries arrived. But that can't be the full answer to why it's returning, until you notice what an electric boat actually needs. An electric boat lives or dies on how little energy it burns, and lifting the hull out of the water is the single biggest way to burn less. The flying tax that killed it on oil becomes the killer feature on electricity. Sweden's Candela P-12 started entering public service in Stockholm around 2024. Computer-stabilized, near-silent flying commuters over the water on a battery. The thing that once made it too expensive is now the thing that makes it possible. So, who killed the boat that flew? Nobody did. We invented a machine that lifts a whole ship into the air, rode it for 30 years, then quietly uninvented it because the fuel bill annoyed us and a duller boat was cheaper. No villain, no memo. Just us doing the unglamorous math and walking away. And now, 40 years later, we're reinventing the same wings. Because a different bill and the battery kind sound finally makes the trick pay. That's the whole human story folded into one boat. We build the miracle, ditch it over accounting, then rediscover it the second the accounting flips. Your ferry used to fly. Give it a few years, it might again. Now you know. Sorry,